Okay, so this is changing the alternator on our 2012 Hyundai Elantra Touring. And so I'm just kind of pointing out a couple of the different areas where there's screws that have to be removed. I believe it was like 2 or 3. That slides, so technically you can, if everything worked right, you would just slide it up and kind of easily slide it out. But of course that's not what happened. First things first, you need to disconnect the battery terminals. This is a general safety precaution. We tend to do it for most things before we start things on the car, but especially for the alternator because you're it's directly connected. You don't want to mess anything else up in the car. So this is just us using a Sharpie to mark the location of the alternator on the mount, because the belts that are connected need to remain tight. So you need to have it at a certain degree in the engine. We did end up raising the car. It would be best to like drive it up on ramps, but we ended up using the hydraulic lift. But that is not as safe, so definitely raise it up. Also, plan on doing an oil change. That's the oil filter right there. It's in the way. We ended up denting it and had to do an oil change anyways. So either time it with an oil change or just, you know, you could put your filter back on if you needed to, but not a dented one. That's why we had to replace ours. So right now we just took off the screw. The one screw, there's like a huge long bolt that goes through that connects the alternator to the bracket that holds it in place. And that one was barely on, like on the outside. It was barely screwed in, but it didn't really need to be because it's just holding up through, it goes through 2 holes in the on the base of the alternator. And you'll see later it's like really kind of wedged into the engine. It was actually hard to get it out. So it's not going to go anywhere. And then this is just, removing that. That's kind of where you adjust if you needed to move the alternator up or down to adjust for the belts. That's the screw there that does that. So we marked on the screw and on the bracket just to be safe. This is a 12 millimeter. And I believe that's what was used for all of them, for most of them. And this was definitely one of those jobs where like halfway, not even halfway through, we were just like, it's a lot. So we definitely saved a lot of money doing it ourselves, but you know, good or professional. So that's one of the connections to the battery, our electrical connections. And then there's a grounding wire too that you have to loosen up. This one, it was really snug, very tight on there, so it took forever to get that loose or disconnected. And you have to be really careful because there's a lot of working parts that you're around that you don't want to damage. So it's just kind of being best to be, you have to be like firm but gentle when removing all of these pieces. And so my husband's underneath the car getting it out. The angle was easier for him for whatever reason. And yeah, it's still kind of wiggling with that. Okay, at this point he's loosening the screw that is connecting the grounding wire. That's just a little metal piece that has to slide around. Basically a screw is sticking out or a bolt is sticking out, and then the grounding wire fits around it, and then you put the nut on top of it and it holds it in tight. It's very necessary to put them all. Your car wouldn't work without it. Okay. The angle is really, there's Sal, our little kitty. There's not a lot of space in here, so it was kind of a beast to get in there. Okay, so again, that's just the grounding wire connection. And ours, like there was one little piece that was like kind of raised for the mounting pin or like where the mounting pin, so it took forever to get this out, which it shouldn't, because when we put the new one in, it just slid right in. That's normal. The amount of time it took us to take this out was insane. And you could see it raised a tiny, tiny bit. And that made all the difference. But it's nothing that we could fix while it was in there. It just was like, just how it is. I was reading something about the fact that, you know, most people don't plan on keeping these cars for that long, so you never really have to deal with a lot of it. But I've also seen people that keep their Hyundais for like 400,000 miles, so I think we're going to go for that. We're at 185, I think, or almost 185. 185,000, so it's getting there. Okay, and it's just a lot of fidgeting, a lot of gentle wiggling. Okay, so that's finally loose. Okay. And that part we just took out and laid down there. Okay, at this point, like we got a mallet in there, we're trying, there's that pin, the mounting bracket pin. At this point, we realize there's a plastic piece that's connected underneath the wheel well that completely makes it so you cannot move that pin out. And took forever to figure out what the heck was going on. And yeah, so he's just trying to loosen the pin. And at some point you can see it. I think I have a shot where you can see what I'm talking about a little bit better. And we were really concerned about keeping the belt, like making sure it stays, the tension stays, but honestly that wasn't a problem. It ended up dropping anyways at one point, and so I had to put it, like, fidget around to get it back in. Okay, I'm trying to hold the belt up at this point, this was like where it was stupid, we should just let it go. Okay, so we can like move the alternator at this point, but it's still stuck in there because of that bracket, or the pin. Okay, at this point, George is filming. I was doing something. Oh, I was trying to zip tie the belt. So I tried to do it to that bracket there, which it worked, but it just wasn't really. I mean, it was good to keep it up, but we had to adjust it anyways. And we just put it as loose as we could without it like falling down. Okay, so here's you can see that's as far as the pin will go, and then it's just like hitting this plastic piece. So that is what is keeping the alternator up in the bracket. It's like a pin, a mounting pin, or the mount, keeping the alternator in the mount. And so on the other side of that plastic is the wheel and the wheel well. So at this point, George goes under there, and there's like two or three screws he had to undo to just kind of move it out of the way. Okay, and so at that point, he's able to, I think we're able to slide it out around here. He's getting those screws out. Okay. Yep, so there's like a few screws he had to get out. At this point, it made a world of difference. There was no way, like we were gonna not be able to do it if we didn't figure that out. So there you can see, just needed to move a tiny bit to get that out. Here we go. Okay, so then this point, we're still trying to, like the alternator is wedged because of that little piece of, there's like a bearing almost that was just kind of out a little bit too much. And so it's super, super wedged. So we were trying everything, like gently using the mallet, just trying to get it out. We still hadn't removed the oil filter yet, so that's why it was taking so long. We just finally had to just realize we had to take the oil filter out. There was no way around it. And so when we did do that, it just made it a lot easier. But it's directly underneath the alternator, so it's not even worth keeping it in to begin with. Okay, so I had stopped recording at one point, so we got it back in. We got the new one in. I think I stopped recording when we did the oil change. So there's the old alternator, and see those, I don't know if you can tell, there's like can't really see it. There's like a black little bearing that kind of was taking up a lot of space. And that's that piece of plastic that he had to put back in. It's kind of just like a barrier to keep all the dirt and debris from the tires and wheel well out of the engine cavity. Getting the alternator in was super easy. It was getting it out that was a nightmare. And that's all. So basically, if you want to attempt this, attempt it. But otherwise, if you have the money, go to a professional.